Hello accounts people, time to have a look at filing and payment dates for sole traders and the penalties for late filing, late payment and a few other penalties as well. Particularly focusing for the business tax exam where it's pretty much a whole task, but also useful information for personal tax students, particularly in the ethical idea. And we're currently in the Finance Act 2024 and the rules haven't changed much. So sole traders always have to stick to a financial year, always ending the 31st of March, and they'll always do the year up until then. Not the 5th of April, which is the fiscal year date, although some dates seem to relate to the 5th, most of them relate to the 31st on all the rules. So the filing date, unless told otherwise, will be January 31st following the year end. So it's now January 2025. People are filing accounts up to March the 31st, 2024. However, if you submit a paper-based one, that should have gone in a few months ago, the 31st of October. So what happens if you don't submit your self-assessment return on time? Well, first of all, there's an immediate late fine of £100. Nobody will actually say exactly when that kicks in. I'm sure it's not within an hour or two, but it will be within a day or two. After that, you get additional penalties. So don't forget the £100. Apparently, a few students doing the exam. This is on top of it, so these are additional penalties. So after 3 months, they start charging you £10 per day, up to 90 days, which is £900 maximum. And the reason why is because after 6 months, it goes on to a different system on top of this. So it's £300 or 5% of the tax due at the date, which of course may be a mixture of payments on accounts and payment and balancing payments, whatever it is. £300 is 5% of £6,000. So if you owed more than £6,000, it will be 5% of that rather than £300. After 12 months, another penalty of the same amount on top, another £300 or 5% of tax due. And of course, by now there's possibly another balancing payment or something else due as well. And then they will also charge a further £300 or 70% of tax due, much more likely to be 70% of tax due, if they know you've deliberately not paid them, although you have admitted the fact that you haven't paid them. And that could be 100% of tax due if you deliberately didn't pay them and you hid away pretending that you didn't have to fill in a self-assessment return. So a couple of examples: somebody who is 5 months, 152 days or 151, 152 days late, they will have incurred an immediate penalty of £100, and we'll call the 2 months 61 days to be precise. It could be 60. Unlikely. Of course, February only has 28 days, so various possibilities in terms of the precise number of days. 61 times 10 is 610, a total fine of £710 for filing 5 months late. 7 months late goes over the 6 month threshold, so now we need to know that the £11,000 is owed, or an estimate from HMRC if they don't know a precise number. The immediate fine will still sit there, and the full 3 months at 90 days, so £900, and then the last month, we'll call it 30 days, but it doesn't actually matter the precise number of days because it's £300 or the 5% of £11,000, which of course is higher in this case, £550. So for filing 7 months late, it's £1,550 worth of fines. That is only the penalty for late filing, not the penalties for late payment or anything else. So let's have a look at the payment date. So for a normal sole trader, that means one who's been established for a few years. The rules for new sole traders are slightly different, and there's a little bit of negotiability there as well. So once established, you make 2 payments on account most of the way through the financial year, in other words the 31st of January, and then just after the financial year, a couple of months afterwards, or 3 months after the 31st of July. So during the tax year and just after, and then the balancing or final payment the 31st of January after the tax year. In other words, the 2025 ones that are going in, that people are paying off up to March 24. Notice there's two items on the 31st of January, one balancing and one payment on account. So payments on account are always 50%. We'll worry about that later when we see some calculations on the next sheet. So 1st of April 2024 to the March upcoming, so useful for planning, know when the dates are. Payment on account will be this month, then another payment in July, and then the final payment next January. 50% I've mentioned. If you were in trouble, or in particular if the business activity was reducing, maybe semi-retirement, maybe going on holiday for a long time or some other reason, you could negotiate to make monthly payments, or you could pay them less. You wouldn't know by 31st of March if the second payment on account was going to be too high, roughly. Prove it to them and make arrangements with them, but don't do it without their agreement. So payments examples then. So we'll use Joshua. He's been trading for a few years, so we're not worried about new or issues. We haven't got the year's tax before, so otherwise the question would just go on for whenever he started. Typical questions: how much is paid in any particular calendar year? In other words, they're testing you. Do you understand the balancing and one payment on account is the same date, and then another payment on account as well? Or they'll just ask you a date of the balancing payment and how much it would be. But pretty much one way or the other, a guaranteed question in the business tax exam. So let's have a look. So here's £16,000 for 2023. Will have been paid. Well, he will have made a payment on account. We don't know how much that is because we'd need to know the previous year's accounts. And then another 50% in July 2023, and then his final payments, just the balance of the £16,000. But on the same day, he will be making a payment on account for the next financial year based on half the previous years, so that would make that one £8,000, half of the £16,000, then another £8,000 in July, and then the balance, which is going to be £2,000 because the final bill came in at £18,000. He's paid two lots of £8,000. And then the following year, so 2024-2025, so we're estimating maybe the 21,000 or just planning ahead for it. 50% of the previous years, 50% of the 18,000, £9,000, then another 9,000, and then a final 3,000. Getting carried away on the zeros. So again, multiple payments on the same day. So if the question was asking what payments were made in 24, it would be this one, and this one. One balancing, two payments on accounts. That's the calendar year of 2024. Calendar year 25 would be the 2009 and the 9, and then the balancing payment, depending on what year they're asking for, would be the 2000 or the 3000 on the 31st of January in the respective year. And then the fines, if you don't do that, a little bit simpler than the filing date fines. It is straightforward: 30 days late, 5% of outstanding tax at that date, which of course might be a mixture of payment on accounts and balancing items. 6 months late, they're going to add another 5% to that, and then another 6 months later a further 5%. The guides don't tell you what's going to happen after that, but by then legal action and court action would probably have taken place. So other issues, HMRC, they can ask you for information, in other words, what they call an inquiry, up to 12 months after your submission. So give them 12 months to check it over. Usually fines if the documents aren't produced within 30 days, although it doesn't say this on the reference, it's generally 30 days, so you've got 30 days to send them the stuff. And that will be a £300 fine for not sending them the documents they ask for, and £60 per day. You have to keep the records up to 5 years from the filing date, and there's a maximum penalty there for £3,000. It is a maximum though of £3,000. And incorrect returns also have fines. I'll just pull that one up straight off the reference material from AAT. It just didn't look right when I typed it into the spreadsheet. So it depends on your behaviour. So if you're just careless, you could argue that we weren't careless, it was somebody else's fault. Misinformation from an accountant, a bookkeeper, a company, HMRC, somebody else giving you wrong information, and we're very sorry, we won't do it again. Somewhere between 0% as a minimum up to 30%. If they have to shout at you and ask for it, it's a minimum of 15%. So that 0% is you telling them that we made a whoopsie and it wasn't our fault, and giving them a good story, and we'll sort it out now. If it was a deliberate error, so you are not returning your self-assessment or it's deliberately putting in something wrong, maybe a bit of window dressing or something, if they don't have to tell you minimum 20%, if they have to tell you 35%, up to a maximum of 70%, and that's 70% of the correct amount of tax owed. It doesn't actually say that on this sheet. Now if you deliberately make an error and you're hiding it from them, hoping they'll never find out, it can go up to 100%. Minimum 30% if you tell them that that means you are deliberately telling them we've made an error and we've been hiding it from you. Don't think that happens very often. Or if they tell you you've not sent your self-assessment return in, or it's wrong, or something along those lines. So bear in mind that this is going to go along with fines for possibly late returns, but most certainly late payments as well. So these are all on top, the same as payments for late. So penalties for late payments are on top of payments for late returns. So deliberate error and concealed, a minimum of 50% if they have to shout at you, if they let you know that they're on to you. So the slight difference with the new sole trader does explain something I don't think it was brilliantly clear when I looked it up on HMRC's website. They talk about 18 months. Well, this is why. So a new sole trader has up until the 5th of October to register for the financial year. So current financial year ends 31st of March effectively. Got them till the 5th of October, the 5th of course being the fiscal date, not the practical date. So if we, for instance, started January a few days ago, 2 weeks ago, or any time during the tax year, that's the date you've got to tell them you're going to have to submit a self-assessment return in. And then everything has got to be paid by the 31st of January. So that's the whole year's tax, which if you started early on in the year, April, that is near enough a whole month's whole year's tax in one lump sum. That seems harsh. Well, this is why we have to plan a little bit accordingly, because normally you'd have made a payment on account. So this 31st of January would be lower because of a payment on account for a normal established sole trader paying some 31st of January and the 31st of July. And that's why the tax bill's larger, because those payments on account haven't been made. However, it's not just the problem of paying the whole year's on the 31st of January, because actually there's a payment on account due for the next financial year. So based on half the year's tax, in other words the year to the 31st of March the previous year's, which is why HMRC mentioned up to 18 months of tax being paid. So although it isn't until 18 months potentially after starting being a sole trader, and it isn't until 6 months after, or 9 months, get the calendar right, having finished your financial year. So it is still quite a long time lapse. It is 18 months tax bill in one payment. And there we are. Now the rules. That's why you have to plan carefully for a sole trader who's just set up in business.